You know Greek mythology as epic tales of heroic gods battling monsters and shaping civilization. Zeus, the mighty king of Olympus, Athena, the wise goddess of strategy, Apollo, the beautiful god of light and art. Western culture built itself on these myths, teaching them to children as stories of noble deities who embodied virtue and cosmic order. But what if I told you that Greek gods were never heroes? What if Zeus wasn't a just king but a serial predator? What if Olympus wasn't heaven but a horror story about absolute power and its corruption? Today, I'm going to show you why Greek mythology was always a cautionary tale about divine monsters. This is the dark truth of Greek gods. And once you see it, you'll never look at ancient mythology the same way again. The Greeks didn't create their gods as moral exemplars. They created them as explanations for a world that felt hostile, arbitrary, and cruel. When crops failed, when plagues swept through cities, when earthquakes destroyed homes, when loved ones died without reason, the Greeks needed someone to blame. They needed forces powerful enough to cause such devastation, and they needed those forces to have motivations they could understand, even if those motivations were terrible. So they created gods who were fundamentally human in their psychology, but cosmic in their power. Gods who felt jealousy, rage, lust, pride, and pettiness. Gods who committed acts of violence, violation, and cruelty on scales that matched the suffering humans experienced. The Greek pantheon isn't a collection of benevolent cosmic parents watching over humanity. It's a warning about what happens when beings have unlimited power and zero accountability. Zeus is the clearest example of this horror. He's introduced in mythology as the hero who overthrew his tyrannical father Kronos and brought order to the cosmos. But the order Zeus establishes is simply his own dominance. His primary characteristic in Greek mythology isn't wisdom or justice, it's sexual violence. Zeus commits assault after assault after assault throughout Greek mythology, and these aren't presented as aberrations. They're presented as fundamental aspects of his character. He transforms into animals to deceive his victims. He appears as golden rain to penetrate locked chambers. He disguises himself as husbands to violate wives. He uses his divine power to trap, coerce, and force himself upon mortal women and goddesses alike. And the mythology doesn't frame this as villainy. It frames it as divine prerogative. Zeus wants, therefore Zeus takes. This is the king of the gods. This is the being Greeks were told to worship and respect. The story of Europa reveals the pattern. Zeus sees her, a Phoenician princess, playing on a beach. He desires her. So he transforms himself into a beautiful white bull, approaches her gently, gains her trust, and when she climbs on his back, he abducts her across the sea to Crete, where he reveals his true form and forces himself upon her. The mythology presents this as romance. Europa becomes the mother of kings. She's elevated by Zeus's attention. But strip away the mythological framing, and you have a story about a predator who uses deception and superior power to isolate and assault a young woman. The bull transformation isn't whimsy, it's strategy. It's a predator making himself appear harmless to his victim. And this story was told to Greek children not as horror, but as foundational myth. The continent of Europe is named after a victim of divine assault. Leda's story follows the same pattern. Zeus sees her, desires her, transforms into a swan, and forces himself upon her while she bathes. Again, this is framed as divine favor. Leda gives birth to Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, and to the Dioscuri, heroes and protectors. Her violation produces important children, therefore the violation is justified by mythology's logic. But the image of a swan overpowering a woman is grotesque. Swans are violent animals. Male swans are known for aggressive mating behavior. The Greeks chose this transformation deliberately. They understood the violence inherent in the image. They encoded assault into their founding myths and called it divine interaction. Danae's imprisonment reveals even darker aspects of Zeus's predation. Her father, King Acrisius, receives a prophecy that his grandson will end him. So he imprisons Danae in a bronze chamber underground, preventing any man from reaching her. Zeus, seeing her trapped and isolated, transforms into golden rain and penetrates the chamber, impregnating her. She gives birth to Perseus, who eventually fulfills the prophecy. The mythology frames Zeus's action as inevitable, even romantic. Golden rain sounds beautiful, but the reality is a woman imprisoned by her father, with no agency, no freedom, no ability to consent or refuse, and Zeus violates her in her captivity. He doesn't free her. He doesn't end her imprisonment. He uses her trapped state to ensure she cannot resist him. This isn't seduction. This is exploitation of complete vulnerability. The pattern repeats with Io, Callisto, Semele, Alcmene, and dozens more. Zeus sees, Zeus desires, Zeus takes. Sometimes he uses disguise. Sometimes he uses deception. Sometimes he uses his divine authority to coerce compliance, and in every case the mythology treats his actions as natural expressions of divine power. The gods can do what they want because they're gods. Consent is irrelevant because humans and lesser deities exist for the pleasure and use of higher powers. This is the moral framework at the center of Greek mythology. Power justifies action. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Semele's story adds another layer of horror to Zeus's pattern. She was a Theban princess, daughter of Cadmus. Zeus visited her in disguise, and she became pregnant with what would become Dionysus. Hera, discovering the affair, disguised herself as an old woman and convinced Semele to ask Zeus to appear before her in his true divine form, the same form he showed Hera. Semele, not understanding the danger, made Zeus promise to grant her one wish, then asked him to reveal himself. Zeus, bound by his oath, appeared in his true form as the god of thunder and lightning. The divine radiance incinerated Semele instantly. Zeus saved the unborn Dionysus by sewing the fetus into his own thigh to carry to term. Semele died because she was manipulated by Hera into making a request that Zeus knew would end her, and Zeus made the oath knowing he couldn't refuse when she asked. Both gods share responsibility for her death, but the mythology frames it as Hera's jealousy and Semele's foolishness, never Zeus's failure to protect a woman carrying his child. Callisto's fate demonstrates how Zeus's transformations enable his predation, while his wife punishes the victims. Callisto was one of Artemis's virgin hunters, devoted to the goddess and sworn to celibacy. Zeus saw her and desired her. Knowing she would never willingly break her vow or accept a male god's advances, Zeus transformed himself into Artemis. He approached Callisto in the form of her own goddess, gained her trust, embraced her, and then revealed his true form and forced himself upon her. This wasn't seduction by disguise. This was strategic assault using the victim's devotion to her goddess against her. When Callisto's pregnancy became visible, Artemis discovered the broken vow, refused to hear explanations, and expelled Callisto from her followers. Hera then transformed Callisto into a bear. Callisto lived as a bear for years, unable to speak, unable to explain, unable to return to human form. When her son Arcas, grown to adulthood, encountered her while hunting, he nearly killed her, not recognizing his mother in bear form. Zeus finally intervened, transforming both Callisto and Arcas into constellations. The mythology presents this astral immortality as honor, but Callisto was violated, punished by the goddess she served, transformed into an animal, nearly ended by her own son, and removed from Earth entirely. Every step of her story is violation and punishment for being violated. Alcmene's story reveals Zeus's willingness to impersonate specific individuals to gain access. Alcmene was married to Amphitryon, a general away at war. Zeus desired her but knew she was faithful to her husband, so Zeus transformed himself into Amphitryon, appeared to Alcmene as her own husband returning from war, and spent the night with her. Alcmene had no way of knowing this wasn't her husband. She consented to intimacy with the man she believed was Amphitryon. When the real Amphitryon returned the next day and approached his wife, she was confused, believing he'd already returned the night before. The deception was eventually discovered, and Alcmene gave birth to twins, one fathered by Zeus and one by Amphitryon. Heracles was Zeus's son, born from this deception. The greatest Greek hero was conceived through identity fraud and violation of a faithful wife who believed she was with her husband. The mythology treats this as Zeus honoring Alcmene by choosing her, never as the profound violation it represents. But Zeus isn't the only predator on Olympus. Poseidon, god of the sea, has his own catalog of assaults. Medusa's story is perhaps the most tragic example of how Greek mythology treats victims. Medusa was a beautiful priestess serving in Athena's temple, sworn to celibacy. Poseidon saw her and desired her. He forced himself upon her inside Athena's sacred temple. And Athena's response wasn't to punish Poseidon, the god who violated the sanctity of her temple and assaulted her priestess. Athena punished Medusa. She transformed Medusa's beautiful hair into serpents and cursed her so that anyone who looked at her would turn to stone. Medusa was violated, then punished for being violated, then transformed into a monster, then hunted and decapitated by Perseus, who used her severed head as a weapon. From beginning to end, Medusa is victimized by gods, and the mythology frames this as just. She becomes the monster. She becomes the threat. Perseus becomes the hero for ending her. The details of Medusa's transformation reveal the cruelty of Athena's response. Some versions suggest Athena transformed Medusa to protect her, giving her a weapon against future attackers in the form of her petrifying gaze. But this protection is itself a curse. Medusa cannot look at anyone without ending them. She cannot have human contact. She cannot return to society. She's exiled to a remote island with her immortal Gorgon sisters, isolated from all human connection, her body transformed into something that inspires horror. If this was protection, it was protection that destroyed everything Medusa was. She couldn't resume her service as priestess. She couldn't marry, have children, maintain friendships, or participate in any normal human activity. Her existence became defined entirely by what Poseidon did to her. She was frozen in the identity of victim, transformed into a living embodiment of violation, and then blamed for being that embodiment. When Perseus was tasked with bringing back Medusa's head, the quest was framed as heroic. Perseus received help from Athena, who had cursed Medusa in the first place, and from Hermes. They gave him a mirrored shield so he could see Medusa without looking directly at her, winged sandals to escape her sisters, and a magical sword to decapitate her. The gods armed Perseus with everything needed to end a woman they had victimized. When Perseus succeeded and cut off Medusa's head, Pegasus and Chrysaor sprang from her neck. She had been pregnant by Poseidon from the assault. She carried the children of her violation inside her for years while living in isolation as a monster, and they were born only when she died. Even in death, Medusa served others. Her head became Perseus's weapon, used to petrify his enemies, including using it to save Andromeda from being sacrificed to a sea monster. Medusa's suffering enabled Perseus's success. Her cursed gaze, product of her victimization, became a tool for a hero's glory. Poseidon's other assaults follow similar patterns. He transformed himself into a stallion to assault Demeter when she was searching for her abducted daughter Persephone. Demeter had transformed herself into a mare to hide from Zeus's attention, and Poseidon, seeing an opportunity, took the form of a stallion. From this assault, Demeter gave birth to Arion, a magical, immortal horse. Again, the assault produces something valuable, a magical creature, and the mythology uses this to frame the assault as consequential rather than criminal. Poseidon assaulted Canis, who then asked Poseidon to transform her into a man so she could never be violated again. Poseidon granted this, and Canis became Caeneus, a warrior of legendary strength whose body was impenetrable. But this transformation was necessary because Poseidon's assault showed Canis that being a woman meant being vulnerable to gods. The only escape was to stop being a woman. The mythology treats this transformation as a gift, but it was a desperate escape from a reality where femininity meant victimization. This victim blaming is systematic in Greek mythology. When Zeus assaults mortal women, it's his wife Hera who punishes them, not Zeus. Hera, herself a victim of Zeus's serial violations, redirects her rage at the women Zeus assaults, rather than at Zeus himself. Io is transformed into a cow, and tormented by a gadfly sent by Hera. Callisto is transformed into a bear. Semele is tricked into demanding Zeus reveal his true form, which incinerates her. Leto is forbidden from giving birth on solid ground and must find a floating island to deliver Apollo and Artemis. These women didn't seduce Zeus. They didn't pursue him. They were targeted by him, and they were punished by Hera for being targeted. The mythology creates a system where male gods have absolute sexual access to anyone they desire, and female gods can only express agency by punishing other women. Io's suffering was particularly prolonged. Zeus transformed her into a white heifer to hide her from Hera's attention, but Hera recognized the deception and demanded Zeus give her the beautiful cow as a gift. Zeus, unable to refuse without revealing his guilt, gave Io to Hera. Hera set Argus Panoptes, the 100-eyed giant, to guard Io and prevent Zeus from accessing her. Zeus sent Hermes to free Io. Hermes killed Argus, and Hera, in tribute to her loyal servant, placed his 100 eyes on the tail of the peacock. But Hera's rage at Io didn't end. She sent a gadfly to torment Io, stinging her constantly, driving her to madness, forcing her to wander the earth in pain and confusion. Io, in cow form, unable to speak, unable to explain, wandered from Greece to Egypt, driven by endless pain. She eventually reached the Nile, where Zeus finally restored her human form, and she gave birth to Epaphus. But her suffering lasted years, and it was entirely punishment for being Zeus's victim. Hera's creative cruelty toward Io demonstrates how the mythology allows female gods to express agency only through tormenting other women. Leto's punishment came before she even gave birth. When Hera discovered Leto was pregnant by Zeus with twins, Hera forbade Leto from giving birth on any solid ground under the sun. Leto wandered desperately, searching for a place to deliver, but every land refused her for fear of Hera's wrath. Finally, Leto found Delos, a floating island not considered solid ground, and gave birth there to Apollo and Artemis. The birth was agonizing and prolonged because Hera also prevented Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, from attending Leto. The other goddesses had to bribe Eileithyia with a necklace to get her to help. Leto's twins were among the most important Olympians, but their mother had to suffer alone, unable to find sanctuary, giving birth in terrible pain on a barren floating rock. And this punishment came not from Zeus, who impregnated her, but from Hera, who enforced the consequences of Zeus's actions onto his victim. Hera herself is trapped in this system. She cannot leave Zeus. She cannot punish him effectively. She is bound by the power structure of Olympus, where Zeus's authority is absolute, so she enacts what power she has against those even more vulnerable than herself. This is how patriarchal systems function. They don't just elevate men over women. They create hierarchies among women where those with proximity to male power can victimize those without such proximity. Hera isn't villainous because she's inherently cruel. She's villainous because the system gives her no other outlet for her rage. She's a victim who has internalized her victimization and perpetuates it downward. And the mythology presents this as her fundamental character, the jealous wife, the vengeful goddess, never the victim of a husband who violates his marriage vows constantly and uses his power to ensure she cannot leave or resist. The few times Hera attempts to challenge Zeus directly reveal how completely powerless she is, despite being queen of the gods. In one myth, Hera, Poseidon, and Athena conspired to bind Zeus in chains while he slept, planning to overthrow him. Zeus awoke bound and helpless, but Thetis, a sea nymph, called the 100-handed giant Briareus to free him. Zeus punished the conspirators severely. He hung Hera from the sky with golden chains, with anvils attached to her feet, and left her suspended in agony. When Hephaestus tried to free his mother, Zeus threw him from Olympus. The message was clear. Any attempt to challenge Zeus's authority would result in torture. Hera could rage against mortal women, but against Zeus himself she was powerless. The one time she tried to assert agency against her abuser, she was tortured, and her son was maimed. After that, her vengeance could only be directed downward, toward those even more vulnerable than herself. Apollo continues the pattern of divine predation. His pursuit of Daphne is taught as a romantic tragedy. Apollo, struck by Eros's arrow, falls in love with Daphne. She, struck by a different arrow, feels only revulsion toward him. Apollo pursues her. She runs. He chases. She begs her father, a river god, to save her. Rather than stopping Apollo, rather than telling a god to respect her refusal, her father transforms her into a laurel tree. Daphne's father chooses to end her humanity rather than confront Apollo's entitlement. And Apollo's response to this? He claims the laurel tree as his sacred plant. He wears laurel wreaths. He decorates his temples with laurel. He ensures that Daphne, even in her transformation, even in her desperate escape from him, remains his possession. The story is framed as Apollo's eternal love, but it's a story about a woman who chose to stop being human rather than be caught by her pursuer, and the pursuer who claimed her anyway. The story of Cassandra reveals Apollo's capacity for cruelty when rejected. Cassandra was a Trojan princess and priestess. Apollo desired her and offered her the gift of prophecy in exchange for her affection. She accepted the gift, but refused the relationship. Apollo, enraged by her refusal, couldn't take back the gift of prophecy, so he cursed it. He made it so no one would ever believe her prophecies. Cassandra could see the future with perfect clarity, could warn her people of disasters, could try to prevent tragedies, but no one would ever believe her. She watched Troy fall, knowing it would happen, having warned everyone, having been dismissed as mad. This is Apollo's punishment for a woman who refused him. Not just denial of relationship, but a lifetime of being right and being ignored, of seeing suffering approach and being powerless to prevent it. And the mythology frames this as Apollo's righteous response to being spurned. Artemis, virgin goddess of the hunt, seems initially to be different. She rejects marriage, surrounds herself with female attendants, and punishes men who violate her space. But her response to Callisto reveals the same victim-blaming pattern. Callisto was one of Artemis's hunters, sworn to virginity like Artemis herself. Zeus saw Callisto, desired her, disguised himself as Artemis to get close to her, and assaulted her. When Callisto's pregnancy became visible, Artemis expelled her from the group and transformed her into a bear. Callisto didn't break her vow voluntarily. She was deceived and violated by Zeus, but Artemis punished her for being violated. The mythology makes clear that even the virgin goddess, even the protector of young women, enforces the system where women are responsible for being targeted by male gods. The story of Actaeon shows Artemis's cruelty toward men, but not in defense of victims. Actaeon, a hunter, accidentally stumbles upon Artemis bathing. He sees her naked. She transforms him into a stag, and his own hunting dogs tear him apart. The mythology frames this as justified because he violated her privacy. But the punishment is grotesque and disproportionate. He didn't assault her. He didn't threaten her. He accidentally saw her, and she had him killed by his own companions in one of the most painful ways possible. Artemis's virginity isn't about protecting women from male violence. It's about protecting her own bodily autonomy while enforcing the same systems of gendered punishment that harm other women. Hephaestus, god of the forge, is presented as sympathetic because he's physically disabled and rejected by the other gods. But his marriage to Aphrodite reveals the same entitlement. Aphrodite was given to Hephaestus by Zeus, not because she chose him, but as compensation for Hephaestus being thrown from Olympus. She's payment. She's a gift to appease an angry sun. And when Aphrodite has an affair with Ares, which she does because she was never given choice in her marriage, Hephaestus doesn't confront the system that treated her as property. He humiliates her. He creates a trap, catches her and Ares together, and displays them naked to all the gods for mockery. The mythology treats this as clever revenge, but it's public sexual humiliation of his wife for exercising the only agency she could in a marriage she never consented to. Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, is often portrayed as the liberator, the god who breaks social boundaries and frees people from constraints. But his liberation is selective and often violent. The story of the Maenads, his female followers, shows women driven to ecstatic frenzy by Dionysus's influence, tearing apart anyone who opposes their god. King Pentheus of Thebes refuses to worship Dionysus. and Dionysus drives the women of Thebes, including Pentheus's mother, into such frenzy that they tear Pentheus limb from limb, with his mother placing his severed head on a stick before realizing she's ended her own son. Dionysus's worship involves loss of self, loss of control, and violence enacted by those under his influence. This isn't liberation. This is possession, and it's called divine ecstasy. Ares, god of war, is at least honest about what he is. He embodies violence, bloodlust, and the chaos of battle. The Greeks didn't even particularly like Ares. They respected Athena, goddess of strategic warfare, but Ares represented senseless slaughter. Yet he's one of the 12 Olympians. Violence has a throne on Olympus. Brutality is divine. The Greeks built war into their cosmic order and called it a god. Ares doesn't pretend to be just. He doesn't claim to fight only righteous battles. He simply loves blood and pain and destruction. He's the most honest god on Olympus because he doesn't dress his cruelty in nobility. Athena is held up as wisdom personified, the virgin warrior goddess who sprang fully formed from Zeus's head, but her birth story itself is horrific. Zeus married Medusa, goddess of wisdom and cunning. When Medusa became pregnant, Zeus received a prophecy that her child would be more powerful than him. So he swallowed Medusa whole while she was pregnant. He consumed her, absorbed her, ensured she could never threaten him. Athena was born from Zeus's head specifically because Zeus murdered her mother and claimed Medusa's wisdom as his own. Athena has no mother in Greek mythology. She's entirely her father's daughter because her father consumed her mother, and this is presented as Athena's origin of power. She inherited her mother's wisdom through her father's act of consumption. The foundation of wisdom, according to Greek mythology, is a man murdering and consuming a woman to prevent her from producing something greater than himself. Athena's treatment of Medusa and Arachne reveals that wisdom doesn't equal compassion. Arachne was a mortal weaver who claimed her skill rivaled Athena's. Athena challenged her to a weaving contest. Arachne wove a tapestry depicting the assaults committed by Zeus and other gods, showing the truth of divine behavior. Her work was flawless. Even Athena couldn't find fault with the technique. But Athena was enraged by the subject matter, by Arachne daring to depict divine crimes. She destroyed the tapestry and transformed Arachne into a spider, condemned to weave forever but never to create art again, only to produce functional web. Arachne was punished for telling the truth. She wove images of Zeus's assaults, of Poseidon's violations, of divine cruelty, and Athena's response was to silence her permanently. Wisdom, in Athena's case, means enforcing the power structure, even when that structure is monstrous. Hermes, messenger god and god of thieves, has his own darkness beneath the clever trickster facade. On the day of his birth, he stole Apollo's cattle, created the lyre, and established himself as a god of cunning and theft. This is portrayed as precocious cleverness, but his role includes guiding souls to the underworld, and his status as god of thieves means he's patron to those who take what isn't theirs. He's charming, quick-witted, and utterly amoral. He helps gods and heroes when it suits him and abandons mortals when it doesn't. He represents the idea that intelligence and charm can excuse any action, that being clever means you're entitled to what you can take. Hades is often portrayed in modern retellings as the most reasonable god, the one who simply does his job ruling the underworld and doesn't involve himself in Olympian politics. But Hades abducted Persephone. He saw her gathering flowers, desired her, and took her to the underworld against her will. Different versions of the myth add different details, but the core is abduction. Zeus gave his permission, treating Persephone as property to be given away without her knowledge or consent. Demeter, Persephone's mother and goddess of harvest, searched for her daughter in anguish. When she discovered what happened, her grief caused the first winter. All crops died. Humanity began to starve. And the gods' solution wasn't to return Persephone. It was to compromise. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades and part with Demeter. She ate pomegranate seeds in the underworld, which bound her there, though versions differ on whether she ate them willingly or was tricked. Either way, Persephone's abduction is the mythological explanation for seasons. Winter exists, because a mother grieves her daughter's violation, and this is framed as cosmic order. The Greek creation myth itself is built on violence. In the beginning, there was chaos. From chaos came Gaia, the earth, and eventually Uranus, the sky. Uranus and Gaia produced the Titans, but Uranus, hating his children, imprisoned them in Gaia's body, in Tartarus deep within the earth. Gaia, in pain from this imprisonment, created a sickle and convinced her son Kronos to use it. Kronos ambushed Uranus and castrated him, throwing the severed genitals into the sea. From the blood of Uranus's castration, the Furies were born, goddesses of vengeance. From the sea foam mixing with the severed genitals, Aphrodite was born. Creation in Greek mythology involves a son castrating his father. Love and beauty are born from an act of genital mutilation. This isn't symbolic language. This is the cosmology. Violence creates the cosmos. Kronos, having overthrown his father, feared the same would happen to him. So he swallowed each of his children as they were born. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all consumed by their father to prevent them from threatening his power. Rhea, their mother, finally deceived Kronos by giving him a stone wrapped in cloth instead of Zeus, her youngest. Zeus was hidden, raised in secret, and eventually returned to force Kronos to regurgitate his siblings. Then Zeus led his siblings in a war against the Titans, the Titanomachy, which lasted 10 years and devastated the cosmos. Zeus won by freeing the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclopes, monsters his father had imprisoned, and with their help, he defeated the Titans and cast them into Tartarus. Zeus's rule begins with patricide, an imprisonment of the previous generation. And then he proceeds to act exactly like his father, controlling through power and violence, consuming anyone who threatens him, perpetuating the cycle. The message of Greek mythology isn't that the gods are good, it's that the gods are powerful. They can do what they want because no one can stop them. Mortals exist to serve, worship, and suffer the consequences of divine whims. Prayers might be answered or ignored based on godly moods. Sacrifices might earn favor or be rejected on arbitrary grounds. A god might help you or destroy you, and you won't know which until it happens. The Greeks didn't create loving cosmic parents. They created capricious tyrants and then built a religious system around appeasing them. The hero myths that emerged from this system reveal the same patterns. Perseus, Heracles, Theseus, Achilles, Jason. These heroes are celebrated for strength and cunning, but their stories are filled with violence against women and innocents. Heracles, in a fit of madness sent by Hera, ends his own wife and children. His 12 labors are penance for that act, but they involve more violence. He ends the Nemean lion, the Hydra, captures the golden hind sacred to Artemis, cleans the Augean stables, and in his final labor, brings Cerberus from the underworld. Many of his labors involve capturing or ending creatures that were just existing in their natural state or fulfilling their own purposes. The Hydra wasn't attacking anyone. It lived in a swamp. Heracles killed it because he was told to. This is heroism in Greek mythology, following orders to commit violence. Theseus is celebrated for ending the Minotaur, but the Minotaur was a victim of circumstances. Born from a curse on Theseus's mother Pasiphae, the Minotaur was imprisoned in a labyrinth and fed Athenian youths as tribute. The creature didn't create this system. King Minos created it. Theseus ended the Minotaur, which needed to happen, but then he abandoned Ariadne, the woman who helped him, on an island. He forgot to change his sails when returning home, causing his father to believe Theseus had died and throw himself into the sea. Theseus becomes king of Athens through his father's death, caused by his own negligence. And his reign involves abducting Helen when she was a child, which sparked conflicts that would later contribute to the Trojan War. Heroism in Greek mythology is complicated at best, monstrous at worst. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior of the Trojan War, is motivated by pride and rage. When Agamemnon takes Achilles' war prize, the captive woman Briseis, Achilles refuses to fight, and Greeks die because of his wounded pride. When his companion Patroclus is ended by Hector, Achilles returns to battle not for Greece but for personal vengeance. He ends Hector and desecrates the body, dragging it behind his chariot. He refuses to return the body for proper burial until the gods themselves intervene. Achilles is a brilliant warrior and a terrible human being. His rage defines him, and that rage is celebrated as heroic passion. The Trojan War itself starts because three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, quarrel over a golden apple inscribed with "To the fairest." They demand Paris, a Trojan prince, judge which of them deserves it. Each goddess offers a bribe. Hera offers power, Athena offers victory in battle, Aphrodite offers the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chooses Aphrodite, and she delivers Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Whether Helen went willingly or was abducted depends on the version, but the result is the same. The Greeks launch a 10-year war that destroys Troy, ends thousands, and ruins countless lives because goddesses quarreled over beauty and a prince chose love as his bribe. The Trojan War, one of the central myths of Greek culture, happens because gods are petty and vain. The aftermath of the war reveals more horror. The Greeks slaughter the men of Troy, enslave the women, throw Hector's infant son from the city walls to ensure no heir survives to seek vengeance. Cassandra, who warned Troy this would happen, is taken as a war prize by Agamemnon. When they return to Greece, she's ended along with Agamemnon by his wife Clytemnestra. The women of Troy, previously royalty, become slaves. Andromache, Hector's widow, watches her son murdered and is given to Achilles' son as property. This is victory in Greek mythology. Total destruction, enslavement, murder of children, reduction of human beings to war prizes. The message embedded in Greek mythology is deeply cynical. Power is the only thing that matters. The strong dominate the weak. The gods do what they want because they can. Mortals suffer and die according to divine whims and godly conflicts. Virtue doesn't protect you. Piety doesn't save you. You can make every correct choice and still be destroyed because a god noticed you and decided to use you or punish you or experiment with you. The Greeks looked at their world, saw suffering and injustice everywhere, and created gods who perfectly explained why. The world is cruel because the beings in charge are cruel. The powerful abuse power because that's what power is for. This is the honest, dark heart of Greek mythology. But we must understand why the Greeks created this system. They weren't naive. They weren't primitive people who couldn't conceive of moral deities. They were sophisticated philosophers, playwrights and thinkers who understood ethics and justice. Yet they created gods who embodied injustice. Why? Because Greek mythology was never meant to provide moral instruction. It was meant to provide explanation. The Greeks looked at their reality and saw that the virtuous suffered and the wicked prospered. They saw that children died of disease while tyrants lived long lives. They saw that hard work didn't guarantee success and that catastrophes struck good people and bad people indiscriminately. They saw that power, not virtue, determined outcomes. And rather than create comforting lies about cosmic justice, they created gods who reflected the reality they observed. The Greeks understood that if gods existed and were truly just, the world wouldn't look like it did. Therefore, if gods existed, they must not be just. They must be like powerful humans, motivated by desire, rage, pride, and whim. This is intellectually honest theology. The Greeks chose accuracy over comfort. They created a mythology that reflected rather than contradicted observable reality. When crops failed, it wasn't because the farmer had sinned. It was because Demeter was grieving, or because Poseidon was angry at the city, or because Zeus had quarreled with another god. Suffering didn't require moral justification. It simply required divine caprice. This is perhaps the darkest wisdom in Greek mythology. The world is not just, and the powers that govern it are not moral. We are subject to forces that don't care about us, and our virtue or vice is largely irrelevant to our fate. This philosophical framework appears repeatedly in Greek tragedy. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex demonstrates how a man can be destroyed despite doing everything right. Oedipus, warned that he would end his father and marry his mother, left his home to avoid this fate. Every choice he made was intended to prevent the prophecy. Yet he killed his biological father in self-defense without knowing who he was, and he married his biological mother without knowing her identity. When the truth was revealed, Oedipus blinded himself, and Jocasta took her own life. The tragedy isn't that Oedipus was evil. The tragedy is that he was doomed regardless of his choices. The gods decreed his fate, and his attempts to avoid it ensured it happened. This is Greek mythology's message about divine justice. There is none. The gods toy with humans, creating prophecies that trap people in doomed narratives, and mortal virtue is irrelevant. Euripides's Medea presents another aspect of this cynicism. Medea, a barbarian princess and sorceress, betrayed her family and murdered her brother to help Jason obtain the Golden Fleece. Jason swore eternal love to her, married her, and had children with her. Then Jason abandoned Medea to marry a Greek princess for political advantage. Medea, in rage and despair, murdered Jason's new bride, the bride's father, and her own children, killing them specifically to hurt Jason by destroying what he valued. At the end of the play, Medea escapes in a chariot pulled by dragons, sent by her grandfather Helios. She isn't punished. She isn't struck down for murdering her children. She escapes and finds sanctuary in Athens. The play ends with Medea unpunished and Jason destroyed. The audience is left with the horror of understanding that the gods don't intervene to prevent atrocity. They protect Medea despite her crimes because she's Helios's granddaughter. Family connection to divine power matters more than morality. Modern culture has sanitized these myths. We teach children about brave heroes and wise goddesses. We turn Zeus into a noble king and Athena into pure wisdom. We erase the assaults, minimize the cruelty, reframe victim blaming as divine justice. Disney made Hercules into a hero's journey about believing in yourself. Percy Jackson made the gods flawed but ultimately caring parents. We cannot accept the actual Greek myths as they were told because they're too honest about power, abuse, and cosmic injustice. We need our myths to have morals, lessons, happy endings. Greek mythology offers none of those things. It offers the truth that the Greeks understood. The world is controlled by forces that don't care about you, and the best you can hope for is to avoid their attention. This is the dark truth of Greek gods. They were never heroes. They were cautionary tales about what unchecked power becomes. They were explanations for a world that felt hostile and random. They were honest depictions of how those with power treat those without it. Zeus is a monster. Hera is a victim who perpetuates her victimization. Athena enforces the system even when the system is unjust. Apollo punishes rejection with eternal cruelty. Poseidon takes what he wants and never faces consequences. The entire pantheon is a catalog of abuse, violation, and the weaponization of power against the vulnerable. And the Greeks told these stories not as warnings against this behavior, but as explanations for why it happens. The gods are like this, therefore the world is like this. Power operates this way at every level. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must, and the cosmos itself is built on violence, violation, and the eternal cycle of the powerful consuming the powerless. Subscribe to Umbral Fables as we continue to open the forbidden archives and explore the shadows of the myths that built us. This is Umbral Fables. We leave you now, not with comfort, but with questions. Look closely. The dark journey continues.